The Jim Harbaugh era has come to an end at Michigan. The now former Michigan head coach, which sounds so weird to say, after 9 years at Michigan, three Big Ten titles, three wins over Ohio State, three trips to the college football playoff over the last 3 years, and the national champion goes out on a high note. The NFL, they were not the NFL rumors that cried wolf this time around. Jim Harbaugh is not the Michigan's head coach anymore. He will coach the Los Angeles Chargers and Justin Herbert out at SoFi Stadium, which is a gorgeous facility. But so we'll talk about it here. Again, we'll do a fuller show with Chris later on this week, discussing what's next and some of the bigger storylines with it. But Anthony here with Clayton, just to really minutes after this thing dropped, not unexpected, given that the Vegas odds makers, not that the books were indicative of where this thing was heading, but pulled the Harbaugh bets off the board yesterday. It seemed like things were heavily trending this direction, and now Michigan is in the market for they shouldn't be in the market. It should be Sharon Moore, but closure. This is it. Clayton, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's obviously a sad day in Ann Arbor for Michigan fans that an outstanding 9 years comes to a close. It kind of felt like this was going to happen this week once we found out this afternoon that Jim Harbaugh was still in Los Angeles after his second interview yesterday. So not a huge shock, as you kind of said. And then it was either, okay, is he going to go to Atlanta for his second interview with the Falcons, or is he going to come back to Ann Arbor and kind of, have things be reset, or will he just be named the head coach of Los Angeles? And obviously that is what happened here. Extremely unfortunate for Michigan, a brutal blow for the Wolverines after, having one of the top coaches in the country for 9 years, 3 straight Big Ten titles on the back end here with the national championship as well. So that's going to be really tough to replace. I agree with you. I think they should name Sharon Moore the head coach almost immediately so they can keep this thing as intact as possible with the roster and the assistant coaching staff. So now we got a lot to look out for when it comes to next steps for Michigan. But what a legacy Jim Harbaugh leaves behind. Almost 20 years of his life spent in Ann Arbor as a ball boy, a cord plugger, the son of Michigan secondary coach Jack Harbaugh back in the 1970s, 5 years as a player with the Wolverines, and then 9 as the head coach, obviously All-American as a player. But his legacy will continue to live on here as well. He's left Michigan in the past for, his dad taking another job, him going to the NFL as a player, and now this one. But Jim Harbaugh, one of the best coaches in Michigan history, if not the best.
And I'll just say this, because no one wants to hear the soliloquy or the obituary for the Harbaugh era, but Michigan obviously in a much better place now than it was 2 years ago when Jim Harbaugh got on a plane to really expecting to take a job with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, you have a ready-made replacement in Sharon Moore.
Right.
There should be and this has been something that's, this courtship with the NFL. It's been a few weeks. Obviously, we've known what the buzz has been going back to, maybe mid-October or so. This should not be a hard decision. Now, again, with Michigan having a new head coach, or with Harbaugh leaving, transfer portal is going to open for 30 days for anyone on the Michigan roster. And again, it's too early to speculate who that might be. And I'll say this is a little bit different of a situation than, really interesting fun fact trivia for years down the road. 3 college football playoff teams, including the 2 teams in the national championship game, will have new coaches heading into next season. Obviously, Saban retiring was a surprise. Kalen DeBoer obviously moving to Alabama. That was quick and abrupt for the folks out in Seattle. But this has kind of been, like I said before, something that's lingered with Harbaugh and with Michigan over these last few years. So as it pertains to players, I can't speak on an individual level what some of those guys are and think. I certainly don't think anyone's blindsided by this. I think Jim Harbaugh has been open with them about what his plans are. They've been open about it on the recruiting trail. I don't expect there to be the same type of exodus that there maybe was at a Washington or an Alabama. And I think they're going to be able to keep this pretty well intact. And that's where I think naming Sharon Moore, if you go anyone outside the family, which I don't think is going to happen. Again, we're not calling the race before it's done, but all signs do indicate it's Sharon Moore. But I do feel like as your next step here, it's naming Sharon Moore the head coach. And as slim as it might be, making Jesse Minter the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football and retaining Ben Herbert. To me, if you're able to get 2 of those 3 things done, that's okay. If you get all 3, you feel really good about this moving forward. But what are your thoughts on the immediate future for these guys?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. 2 out of the 3. Obviously it seems, as you said, like a low probability that they'll be able to retain Jesse Minter, probably be Jim Harbaugh's defensive coordinator in the NFL, but you have to take a swing, right? Because Jesse Minter might just be the best DC in college football, at least for the next day or so, until he's not. But Sharon Moore, as we said, I think that would be the right move. And then Ben Herbert is right near the top of the list as well, as you mentioned, for the things on the to-do list for Sharon Moore and those at Michigan, including Ward Manuel, who, depending on how many days it takes here to name Sharon Moore or whoever it is, the next head coach, obviously now it's up to Ward Manuel to keep things as intact as possible. But specifically on the transfer portal, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to have the exodus that Alabama and Washington did, because those were external hires. But it's a precarious situation because, yeah, they love Sharon Moore and he has a great relationship with players. But right now it's about to be the Wild West. I mean, as soon as Jim Harbaugh is officially not Michigan's coach anymore, I don't know what process has to go through there, and that transfer portal opens. Whether or not he has a great relationship with a guy who's expected to be named the head coach for at least some sort of time period, Michigan's not going to have a head coach. And other programs around the country, as they already do anyway, are going to try to poach Michigan's players. So I think it's something to really be cautious about. Money's going to fly everywhere. Michigan has to, do everything they possibly can to move quickly, as we've said, not only with Sharon Moore, but the rest of his staff, and making sure those conversations are happening with the players. Because the issue is that Washington and Alabama have run into is that there are 30 days for their players to leave, but there aren't that many players in the transfer portal right now for them to pick up. So your roster can get depleted pretty quickly. Alabama obviously had a ton of talent there. They'll be fine, relatively speaking. Washington is actually pretty depleted from a roster standpoint. They've been able to hang on to a couple of key guys, but I don't think it'll happen to Michigan to the extent of Washington, but you want to mitigate as much of that as possible here. And that's why this next week or so is so important.
Yeah, I want to get to a couple of these super chats here. We have one from Z Shaw who said, "Dear Jim, please leave Ben Herbert at Michigan." Yeah, we just discussed that. I mean, that's a huge one. Lori O says, "Thank you, Jim, and good luck. Please tell me U of M understands they have to protect the roster. They have to move now." Yeah, here's the thing. And this is maybe something that we go a little more in depth on when we do the show with the 3 of us, is that Michigan leaked today. And again, you said it. A lot of people said it. It was a strategic leak to make it, not saying that this wasn't what they had offered Jim Harbaugh, but we're going to make him the highest paid coach in college football.
Mm-hmm.
Going to throw all these resources at it. There is no excuse to not take that money that you had, this rainy day fund, so to speak, and throw it towards, giving, well, obviously the school can't give it directly to NIL, but you got to give Sharon Moore. I think you have to expand that recruiting department. Give anyone who decides to stick around on the staff a raise, if that's what it takes to kind of keep this all together. And again, what we saw is opportunity spurn. I don't want to do the Ohio State thing really, but they just raised what, $13-15 million, whatever it was, to go get whoever they wanted in the transfer portal and for NIL and to take advantage of, some of these other programs that have had coaching changes. And you have to be able to fight fire with fire because this is the era of college football that you're in now. So it takes, mobilization from the athletic department. I tend to believe that this might not end favorably for some athletic department leadership. I'll just leave that be for now. But, this is now an all hands on deck effort to give, let's just say on the 1% chance it's not Sharon Moore, the resources they need to build this thing and keep this thing humming into a college football that's going to look very different. And that's what was so satisfying about this year was that you went out and won the biggest games in the last Big Ten that will ever have those type of stakes. You won the last 4-team college football playoff. You did all of this in the last year of college football that is kind of like a facsimile of what we've grown up watching, what everyone has seen. And now it's going to look different. And you cannot be reactive in this new era. You have to be proactive. And that you've got some finality, you've got some closure now. I assume you're not going to light the first 4 to 6 weeks of the off season on fire, moving forward here with whoever it is next. But there has to be an understanding that it's time for everyone, and pardon my French, it's time for everyone to get their shit together, because there are intangible things that Jim Harbaugh brought that you just will not be able to replace.
Well, I almost don't see it as closure. I feel like this is the beginning of what's going to be a pretty crazy and hectic time for Michigan here that they have to take advantages of, as you said. It will be interesting to see, because the rainy day fund, basically throwing that last ditch offer at Jim Harbaugh to make him the highest paid coach in the country. I mean, some of the math will change there, because you're not going to have Jim Harbaugh, right, to maybe bring in some of that money, and you're not exactly certain on what you're getting. I mean, if there was one sure thing that out there, for Michigan, it's that they could win with Jim Harbaugh. So I think that's why he was worth that offer. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of money they give Sharon Moore if he's the next head coach. What kind of assistant, coaching salary pool that they allow there, and then what other kind of structural changes to the program, the department that they make in terms of aligning on NIL and things of that nature, as you were just talking about. So I'm just interested to see what kind of support they put around Sharon Moore or the next Michigan head coach, because you don't have that sure thing in Jim Harbaugh anymore. And, Jim Harbaugh you could kind of just, give him the keys to Schembechler Hall and kind of let him run the program. And you kind of knew what you were going to get, especially the last few years with the way he had this thing humming. So that is, not the case anymore. It's not a knock against whoever's the next coach. It's just, the fact that when you have perhaps the best coach in the country, you're going to have a downgrade. It's the same thing I said when John Beeline left Michigan is, you have to just kind of come to the realization that, you can maybe win at a similar level, but it's going to be different. It's going to take more. It's going to take something different to do that under Juwan Howard. Michigan hasn't been able to sustain that type of success on the basketball side, but it's just going to have to structurally be different for Michigan moving forward with whoever the next coach is.